Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Reasonable Doubt. As always, we are brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I am your host, Jimmy Ardwan, along with my co-host, Damon Parrish. We will be with you for the next hour. We've got a great show tonight. We're going to be talking a lot of current events. President Obama today making the first trip of a sitting U.S. president to the El Reno Federal Penitentiary in Oklahoma City, outside Oklahoma City. Big news, on the heels of him commuting 46 sentences this week. We've got that to talk about. We've got a bunch of other things to talk about tonight. We really hope you get joined in the conversation with us. We're going to be on Twitter tonight. We'll be taking your questions and comments on the air at HCCLA_TV. We'll also open up our phone lines at 8:30, and you can call in and give us your questions or comments. And I want to get right to it. We're going to bring in the gentleman to my left tonight, my co-host. Let me introduce everybody. My co-host, Damon Parrish.
How you doing? I like that beard, Jimmy. You're starting to come to the dark side, and I appreciate it.
Well, you know, it seems to be a cultural thing, this whole beard, so I'm kind of listening.
Makes you manly, right?
I guess, that's what they say.
You know, it's how you know you hit puberty when you start growing facial hair.
I think there's a blog called The Art of Manliness, so I'm consulting with that.
Sounds like your wife is doing stuff for you, man. You got to say no to that.
Hey, you know how it goes.
I know how it goes.
You do what the wife tells you to do.
Absolutely.
Next to him, our guest this evening, one of our guests, the indomitable Wayne Heller. He says he's going to be on his best behavior tonight. We don't want you on your best behavior. We want you on a little bit dialed down, but we want your full personality otherwise.
I am dominable, and I want to thank you for having me back. The first time I did Reasonable Doubt, I had a lot more hair, which isn't saying much. But I'm looking forward to this.
It's going to be fun. Our other guest, Jamal Haynes, former prosecutor and current HCCLA board member. Jamal, thanks for joining us this evening.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm always glad to come down and participate whenever I can.
Well, we're going to have some fun tonight. We've got a lot to get to. I want to start off, obviously, the big news today. President of the United States, President Barack Obama, makes the first trip of any president, not sitting or otherwise, makes the first trip today to a federal prison, the El Reno, I think it was actually the Federal Correctional Institute, which is a medium security prison. But he went there, he visited with inmates. HBO was filming a special, I think called Vice, as I understand it. He visited with a lot of the prison staff there. And it was kind of a surreal moment. I watched the video clips of him going in, and let me tell you, having been to a federal prison, seeing that motorcade pull up and watch the President of the United States walk in, he toured a cell, sleeves rolled up, jacket rolled up, sitting in basically the visiting area that all of us who practice know very well where we meet our clients. It was kind of a surreal moment. And of course, this comes, as I said in the intro, he commuted 46 sentences this week, the biggest and broadest use of the commutation power of the president, a lot of it dealing with nonviolent, low-level drug offenders. And so I just kind of want to start off the evening and get each of y'all's thoughts on this. And feel free to just weigh in and let's go around the table and get everybody's thoughts first.
Well, I would say it's about time, right? He commuted sentences for the mandatory minimums that were done I think it's Booker or whatever it was, that said you don't have to have a mandatory minimum or follow the guideline amount. And what he did was say, hey, these people have served a lot of time. I mean, some of these people 10 to 15 years on what would amount to minor amounts of crack cocaine.
Right.
They have definitely done their time, and they've paid their price in full. And let's move them out and get them going, right? Let's stop spending tax dollars on housing somebody for what would have been in state court, maybe a state jail felony, maybe a third degree, and let's get them out and start really focusing on what matters. I mean, it's about time. Plus, he got down and dirty. He got in it, instead of preaching from up high about what it should be, he got down to the nitty-gritty and saw what it's like to be there. And I think that will help, I hope it will help him and help us to create policies moving forward that make more sense.
Wayne, you've kind of been around longer than the rest of us on this table.
Longer than dirt, I believe is the expression.
Well, I don't want to go that far, but you've seen the shift. You've seen the pendulum swing from where there wasn't these mandatory minimums and there was more discretion in the federal judiciary to the hardcore. And honestly, the ironic thing about this, guys, is that we also had this week President Clinton come out and say it was my passing of the Crime Act that has really resulted of this. And so I want to get your thoughts on this because you've seen it kind of go both ways, and now the pendulum seems to be coming back.
It is, and it's about time. For the general public, let me explain. There's two general sentencing schemes. Determinant sentencing, like in federal court, where you take, let's say, 2 kilos of cocaine, 3 prior convictions, and the judges hate it because a monkey in a black robe could do it. Plug that into the computer and you get 111 months. Compare that to Texas state court, for example, where we have ranges of punishment, 2 to 10, 2 to 20, 5 to 99. And that way the judge can craft the punishment to fit the crime. And just for an example, aggravated robbery is a first-degree felony. That provides a punishment of 5 years to 99 years or life. Now, not every aggravated robbery is the same. One, for example, could be a guy going in, beating up a bunch of old people, putting guns in their faces and hurting people. Compare that to a guy whose wife's dying of cancer. He can't afford the chemo, so what does he do? He goes into a drugstore, apologizes, and robs to get the money for the medicine. Now, do both those crimes deserve the same punishment? Of course not, and that's all Obama was recognizing. One other point I want to add in here, I think it's great that he went and toured a federal prison, but I'd like to expand that program. How about before a judge or some young prosecutor debutante against crime who's never talked to one of our clients before in their lives, what if they had to go spend one night in jail and they saw what it's like before they're allowed to incarcerate children for smoking marijuana? Give them a taste of the punishment before they're allowed to mete it out with no life experience.
And I'm glad you brought that up because, Jamal, as a former prosecutor, I mean, before you became a prosecutor, you had never visited a jail, and I'm assuming when you were a prosecutor, you never visited a jail, and it wasn't until you became a defense lawyer that you had the opportunity to go visit a client and see what jail was actually like.
Well, actually, the first time I went to a prison, it was in Mississippi.
Okay.
As part of a church convention, we went to Parchment, which is one of the major penitentiaries in Mississippi, and you get to see, some of the guys and how they live, and it's an experience you don't ever forget.
And that was before you became a prosecutor?
That was when I was in high school.
Okay.
So definitely before he was a prosecutor.
Yeah,
A
definitely.
very long time before I was a prosecutor.
So you would be the exception then at
The one and only.
the district attorney's office.
I assume I'd be the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
And we went, it was near my senior year in high school, and what I learned there, because they had a lot of guys talk about the things that they had done and what happened since they've been there. And what I noticed is that a lot of guys got long sentences for things they did when they were very young. So you have someone who's in prison for a robbery that they committed when they were 19 and 20, but they're now in their 50s, still paying their debt to society. And we all know, as you age, you change. Most people are not the same person they were at 20. That's a part of life, you grow. And when you grow, we should recognize that things change.
Right.
Your perspective is different.
How often was that?
Another point to what you just said, Jamal, is when you spend 30 years of your life in prison, you almost can't get out. When you're 20 years old and you go to prison and you're now 50, when you get out, what are you going to do? You probably don't have any kind of a career education, career experience, so they let you out at 55, and what happens? The only life you know to do is the life you came from. It is crime. It's the only life that doesn't require an education, right? And then, you end up being brought back into the system because you haven't learned to do anything different. I mean, I think it's totally silly to have somebody spend 40 years for a crime, and like Jamal just said, they have changed, they're mature.
And the world changes. A lot of the guys that went in during the 80s, whenever they had the crack scare, which is really all it was with those sentencing guidelines, they now, if they're getting out, you realize that you have cell phones, you have laptop computers. Those things weren't available in the early 80s.
It didn't exist.
Well, just think if you went to prison in 2006 and you're still not out or just getting out, you've never seen an iPhone.
Never. You don't know what it is.
You didn't even know what an iPhone looks like other than if somebody mailed it to you.
There's
You
another
think a
factor.
tablet's a pill you take.
There's another factor at play here I'd like to throw in, and that's age. Turns out the FBI statistics confirm that it's the lion's share, upwards of 90% of crime in America is committed by males between the ages of 18 and 30. When I first started out back in the 80s, the head of TDC was a criminologist by the name of Dr. Ray Procunier. And he had a theory. He said, give me these kids when they're 18 or 20, lock them up to their 25 or 30, and they get it out of their system. We break their spirits. They come out as young adults, and they don't want to go back to prison. So they double down and try extra hard to stay out. And of course, that's not true for everybody. But if it's true for half of the offenders, well, I think the answer is pretty clear.
Well, and there was an article not too long ago in the Washington Post, I believe it was, that talked about our aging prison population. And we've had these mandatory minimum sentences of 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, where people want on, again, the 3 strikes you're out policy that's been there and how we get to this. And that is what's adding a tremendous cost and burden on our system, because the cost of incarcerating an elderly inmate is what is really burdening the tax system and the prison system, and that you've got certain prisons that have basically become a nursing home.
Yeah, Texas has tons of them. My mother works for one. I mean, you'd be surprised how many people they have in there that are now, like I said, can't get out. I mean, you've been in your entire life, and now you have diabetes or you may have cancer. You can't get out. What are you going to do? Where are you going to live?
I wonder, just philosophically speaking, guys, and just chime in on it whenever strikes you, but it's a great move by the president, in my opinion, to do not just what he did with the commutations, but the symbolism of going visit a prison. And this is something that he and former Attorney General Eric Holder have been really pushing as part of their administration and part of their cabinet, is sentencing reform. But I wonder if it's too little too late. In terms of, it's kind of happened in the back half of the presidency, and the second term is really when we've started to make some momentum on it. And I'm wondering, do you guys think it'll lose momentum regardless of which party gets into power, but just with a new president? Do you think that this will lose momentum because obviously when a new president comes in, there are bigger priorities that are going to be at stake?
Not only bigger priorities, it's a question of where are the votes. I don't think anyone's going to get any votes by showing mercy on our clients. It's that simple. You beat the drum of tighten up on crime. And there's a long history of that. That's how Nixon got elected in the 60s, was scaring white people about black folk crime. It worked. That's the sad thing. Republicans run for re-election on fear. And it's a very effective tactic. And I don't think that's going to change unless you can change human nature. And that's not going to happen.
What about the Democrat Party? I mean, do you think that they will carry this legacy on, or is it something that might die on the vine, so to speak, once President Obama leaves office?
I think a lot of this, unfortunately, may end up dying on the vine unless we can find a way to show that these prolonged sentences are hurting your budget, or the state budget, or the national budgets. Exactly. Because that's what people care about. Just about every judge that gets elected running, saying that they're tough on crime. They tout their law enforcement backgrounds, but nobody really says that, you know what, I'm smart on crime. I want to do things differently. Let's have sentences that fit the crime and the offender, not necessarily hammer them for the rest of their life.
It's a really good point about the budget, too. It's an old cliche, but it's true. It costs less money to send a kid to Harvard for a year than to lock him up in prison for a year. Now, which do you think would stop crime more?
Right. A lot of our clients, they're in jail because they don't realize the options they may have.
Right.
And because they don't realize those options, they end up doing things that they see people in the community doing. For example, I represented one guy, very smart. He was great at numbers, but he didn't have someone in his life to show him that if you go to school, you can do well. He saw the guys on the corner selling drugs. They had money, they had clothes, they had cars. That was appealing to him, and that's what he chased. Given a different option, I think he could have been doctor, lawyer, scientist, who knows? But because he didn't see any better than what was around him, he ended up falling into the same trap that most people around him were in.
That's exactly right, and I'm going to throw in a great example of that. 20 years ago, I represented a young black kid, couldn't have been 20. It was an armed robbery case, and I lectured him. I got in his face. I don't have any kids. I got to lecture somebody. And I was explaining to him, you're going to flush your life down the drain. And this young man looked at me and said something that's stuck with me now for 2 decades, and it's really sad. He said, Mr. Heller, what you're telling me is that I could fry burgers for $3 an hour, or I could sell crack, rob stores, and drive a Cadillac and have all the women I want. What would you do? And I thought about that. And my guess is I would have done the same thing that young black kid did. But I didn't because I had options. Just like you said, Jamal, this kid didn't see his options, and that's sad. And I think if we gave poor people more options, they wouldn't choose crime. It's a simple deal.
And that just speaks to a greater societal issue more than anything in terms of the opportunities that are available based on your ethnicity, your social class, your upbringing. I mean, that's something that's a lot bigger than just amending the sentencing guidelines and how judges, mete out sentences. But I think it's a step in the right direction. I hope we see some more meaningful change coming from the Senate Judiciary Committee. I really do. I think we get a good start with the drug quantity table being lowered. So I'm optimistic, but we'll see. I want to turn to our next topic, get on some local topics here, and more of the same with these judges. God bless. Texas judges just giving us a bad name, and this is all. And I have to say, what, is this something with Jade Helm? I mean, it is starting today, and we do have you on the show, Wayne Heller. So, things may be coming to an end. But I want to talk about this judge up in Denton County, up on the heels of our own clerk here in Harris County initially saying he was going to refuse to issue same-sex marriage licenses. This judge has the audacity to ask couples, same-sex couples, and I guess all couples really, just to acknowledge the fact that I ain't down with that. I'm not cool with same-sex marriage, and so I just want you to acknowledge it. I'll perform the marriage, but I'm not down with that. What?
I think there's a pretty simple way to look at a situation like that. Instead of saying gay marriage, why don't we say interracial marriage? And can you imagine for a moment a judge who said, look, I'll marry a black guy and a white girl, but not unless you sign this piece of paper saying I don't approve of it. We'd have that judge's head on a stick. And what's the difference?
Well, isn't it more of a case of just the greatest hypocrisy of all, guys, that these judges who tell our clients to follow the law, I don't want to see you back in my court breaking the law, and here they are breaking the law.
Well, isn't that the kind of the argument against a lot of judges, period, across the board, be they follow the law or not, and prosecutors as well. The kind of blatant hypocrisy. The idea that I can pick and choose the laws that are important. So I will say what you did is 100% wrong. I don't like you, and I will punish you or mete out my own form of justice or penance or whatever upon you. But when it's my stuff, well, it really isn't that important, or it's not that big of a deal. Every week since this whole gay marriage thing came out, I've said these judges are making Texas look bad.
Yeah.
And it's not like Texas. People already think we're cowboys, and we are, and we have a lot of Texas pride. I'm a very proud Texan, right? And so I very much love touting the fact that I'm a Texan. Having traveled a limited time outside the country, people ask where I'm from. I say Texas. Let me say United States. I'm from Texas. But
It's like a whole nother country. Now.
Right, and they recognize it. They say Texas, bing, bing, you ride a horse to, I used to have a sister in Philadelphia, and somebody asked me one time, do we all ride horses to school? I was in high school, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, you guys don't? Where's your I didn't know what to say at the time. Where's your thing to tie your horse up at? So I'm all for that, but when they do this kind of stuff, it's like, come on. You're making us look silly. You're making us look like Texas is full of backwatered people who speak this rhetoric and these silly words that aren't all of us. You don't have to agree with same-sex marriage. You don't. You can be an official and not agree with it. But as an official, you have an obligation. The law has spoken, and now you must follow it. And if you cannot, step aside.
It's disappointing how they put politics in front of their duty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because that's really all it is. With a lot of these clerks that said they wouldn't issue the licenses, even with this judge, and I believe this judge is a JP. I don't believe he's a district court judge or a county court judge.
Yeah.
Well, his concern is keeping his bench. So how does he keep his bench in Denton? He wants to make sure that the people of Denton know he's opposed to same-sex marriage.
But I'm sure you didn't take the same position with traffic tickets. I'm opposed to enforcing traffic tickets.
And I have one question to that judge. Under whose authority do they have to sign that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
If they don't sign it, what happens? What happens? Nothing.
Yeah.
Right. You sue him, and then I guarantee you the cost of dragging Denton County through some civil lawsuit because this Yahoo made you sign this form or wouldn't marry if you did should weigh more on voters' minds than the fact that you signed this form. I mean, even if you don't agree with it, it's the law now. So you can always be like, well, I don't like it, and say it publicly, and then go ahead and do your job. I mean, that's fine.
It's all just a publicity stunt anyway. There's no gay couple who's going to go to Denton, Texas and ask this judge to marry him. No. It's not even an issue. He did it to get publicity and votes. It's just that simple.
Get his picture above the fold, as they say.
And it's working.
Absolutely.
Let's turn to more judges behaving badly in, of course, Texas. And that would be right up the road in Waco. This case just keeps getting better. It's the gift that keeps on giving for people like you and me, Damon, who like to talk about these issues and bring on people to just vent and go at them. So the district judge up in Waco decided to go ahead and appoint a former police detective to the grand jury investigating the biker melee, if you will, at the Twin Peaks up there. This is just idiotic, guys. I know no other way to describe it other than idiotic. What the hell can we do to stop this kind of stuff?
Well, I don't know what we can do to stop it, but here's a way to analyze it. What if the judge would have appointed the head of the Banditos to run the grand jury? How would the cops feel about that? Well, that's the way we feel about what this judge did. And it's slowly changing. There's a new grand jury law right now requiring random selection of grand jurors. Just went into effect. And perhaps the state legislature can change this. But my problem is that it doesn't pass the smell test. Even if it's not technically illegal, it casts doubt on the fairness of that grand jury. And the old judicial canon avoid the appearance of impropriety as well as actual impropriety.
Well, and we already have huge questions about the fairness of the investigation, of the fairness of the bail system.
Who actually shot who?
Yeah, who shot who? Who shot the butler? But we're just stacking one thing on top of another in this case, and it just seems to be compounding the issues.
The question I have is, how many sitting grand jurors are there in Waco or in McClellan County? Here in Harris County, we have on an average of 4 grand juries sitting at one time. In Waco, much smaller jurisdiction, I'm pretty sure they only have that one grand jury.
I would think.
So So what mechanism do you create to go around that? Do you call a special grand jury specifically for that case?
Unless, and I haven't seen anything that says it, but that seems to be when you've got 177 people to run these cases, the 177 cases to run through, it seems like the only prudent thing might be to impanel a special grand jury for this, because the other thing, guys, is how do any of the other cases get moved in McLennan County? You've got people
just
sitting in jail, awaiting trial, awaiting justice, and this is going to clog up the court system. So you got this circus going on of the judges, the JP doing this, the district judge doing that, and meanwhile, you still got other people who are being arrested on cases and have to be, shepherded through the criminal justice system.
Well, Jimmy, I'm going to take a different approach on it. I'm going to say I'm glad that guy was appointed, and not because I think he'll be fair. I'm giving a benefit of a doubt he might be, but I believe he won't. I'm going to say I like it because it's these kind of things that happen that make it easier for us to point out injustice. I mean, when it's just theoretical, when we just talk about what happens to our clients on a one-off, everybody says it's a one-off or it's private. We all as defense attorneys, we share the same stories. I think I can plug one of my stories for one of your stories. You can take your client's name and I can tell you about the trial plan right now and you'll have a similar situation. It's how it is. But the public doesn't get to see it. And I think when this kind of silly stuff where you point a cop to investigate this situation where we believe cops are involved in the shooting. Well, we know they're involved in the shooting, but it's believed now that cops did all the killing, right? Then you now have the fox guarding the hen house, and that makes the public aware of it, and hopefully makes them more incensed by it. I mean, we have new laws coming out, and now that this stuff is public, it's not private, the public gets to see this kind of crazy, idiotic stuff, and I believe also if he does something out of line, which I'm sure he will, right? It's Texas, and so we are boastful in what we do. We're proud of our ignorance sometimes, that we do it loudly. Then the people can see it and make the corrections.
What's the worst that can happen if you have an officer on a grand jury? Does the name Alfred Brown ring a bell to anyone?
Right.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get to that a little later. But
we're going Mr. Brown next, but absolutely. I mean, that's the kind of silliness that brings it to the forefront.
Well, but it's more of a credibility issue than anything. I think the bottom line, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, is that the cynic in all of us is going to say, this is just a circus. I mean, you're putting somebody up there. who is going to rubber stamp. I mean, we talk about every day about how a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich. Well, this guy, he's the foreman. You don't think he's going to be leading the charge and have it right there? True Bill.
Yes.
177 times.
I suspect he cannot put aside his relationships with those officers who are going to be the complainants on cases brought into their grand juries.
The sad thing is that the grand jury is so subject to manipulation. In the early 90s, Judge Norman Lanford of the 339th District Court right here in Harris County impounded a grand jury with 2 defense lawyers on it, Randy Schaefer and Brian Weiss. You know what happened? The district attorney's office stopped presenting cases to that grand jury, and I love this statistic. It's because that particular grand jury was only indicting 91% of their cases, and the average at the time was 97% indictment rate.
Well, and what I'm want to kind of focus on a little bit here is a grand jury would have a duty to investigate everything, right, guys? So if a grand jury believed that there was police misconduct, they could potentially issue grand jury subpoenas. They could call their own witnesses. They wouldn't have to rely on the state to say this is who we're going to bring in. I mean, the grand jury could sua sponte on its own decide, hey, we want to look at that cop there. And I just think that with this guy sitting on there, that's not going to happen.
It's not only not going to happen, even if it does happen, all the district attorney's office has to do is stop presenting the cases to that grand jury. Rack up another. Wouldn't it be sweet, gentlemen? You don't like this jury? Give me another. Because that's what the DAs do.
And, you know, there was a gag order, but there's a lawyer up in Dallas, Clint Broden. I don't know if any of you guys know him, but he has become the torch carrier here in terms of really being outspoken about this and saying basically, I don't care about this gag order. This is injustice. How do we get more lawyers to be like that? And how do we get them out of the fear of retribution and get them to do more things like that?
You got to be brave and crazy. There's another lawyer involved in the Waco case out of Austin,
Adam Raposa.
Who is definitely brave and crazy
There's
and
no
a
doubt about
great
that.
lawyer, and I'm expecting big fireworks from Adam.
He had some fireworks early on, but they seem to have died down here lately. I guess he was one of the first to file the motion to recuse. And you're right. He's brash, he's crazy, he's unrelenting.
And gets great results.
He
with
does.
juries.
He does. But that's 2. There's 177 clients here, guys, or defendants, who are clients to some lawyers. Mm-hmm. And so there's potentially, 175 or so lawyers that aren't doing the same thing.
Well, you know, we talked about it last time, Jimmy, with Casey on the show. Mm-hmm. And there is a fear of reprisal. And if this is how you make your money, if you're just starting out in law school and you're looking at this Mountain O student loan debt, which Sally Mae calls you wants a day on for she wants her money, it's kind of hard to live up to those ethics you have and want to have when you know you have a fear of reprisal that can completely cut off your monetary fund.
Yeah.
And I understand that, and I respect the fear in that. I do believe in this certain circumstance, the gag order may or may not, if you want to follow there or not, it's up to you. There will be reprisal. But I think there are other avenues you can go through, especially in Waco, to bring forth certain things that can help push that issue. We do it here right now, right? Judges don't always like us, but hopefully at the end of the day, if they respect us, you know, they may not like you, but if they respect you're a trial dog and you will do it, then you can get forth results for your clients and make those motions. And just kind of don't be afraid to be the bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is no popularity contest being a criminal defense lawyer.
No.
In fact, just the opposite.
Anti-popularity.
If they're mad at us, it probably means we're doing our job right. And I think this would be a good time to read that Clarence Darrow quote. My personal hero, and this is for all the young lawyers out there, if you want to learn how to do this right, look at the best lawyer in history. Clarence Darrow once said that to be an effective criminal defense counsel, an attorney must be prepared to be demanding, outrageous, irreverent, blasphemous, a rogue, a renegade, and a hated, isolated, and lonely person. Few love a spokesman for the despised and damned until they need a lawyer themselves. It's interesting. Everybody reveres doctors, but if you look at satisfaction surveys amongst professionals, lawyers are always at the top. Everybody hates the other guy's lawyer. Everybody there loves their lawyer. Because like a good doctor, folks, we save lives.
That's true.
We ought to be proud of it. I know I am.
I think what a lot of lawyers forget is what our clients expect from us. If they've been accused with a crime and they're facing jail time, they want us to go into a courtroom and raise holy hell for them. Win or lose, they expect a fight.
Right, a dogged fight.
So it's our job to give them the fight they deserve.
That's true.
And when you sign up for it, you tell them you will. That's the sad part about it. You tell them, I'm going to fight hard for you, and you kind of go in there and you don't. That's the sad part. So hopefully, Waco, Houston, anywhere in this country where there's a defense attorney, you get a client, you fight for him. You don't have to be liked, but hopefully you can be respected.
Well, we're going to watch as this fight, no doubt, gets more interesting as it goes along, and hopefully we'll be able to see how this grand jury shakes out. I'm sure there'll be more for us to discuss. It'll create great stories for us and our future guests. But it's 8:30 right now. I want to remind everybody we're opening up the phone lines. We've got the phone number up at the bottom of the screen, 713-807-1794. Call us with your questions and comments for Wayne Heller and Jamal Haynes. We'll be taking them the rest of the night. We're also on Twitter. Nobody's tweeting in at this point, Damon. We need to get active at HCStella_TV.
As the old guy on the paddle, I got to throw it in. What's Twitter?
Wayne, is this thing on the internet that you can send us questions and it'll appear right here on my screen.
My young law partner would be proud. I was telling her once, I don't twit because I can't say anything in 40 words. I didn't realize it was 40 letters.
That's 140. 140.
Is it so?
Yeah.
I'm officially an old guy, gentlemen.
You've got a little more to work with. All right, next topic I want to turn to, guys, and this mess out of Orange County kind of mirrors a lot of the things that are going on here in Harris County. So I want to kind of start with it, and we can kind of take it down to what's going on and kind of apply it to what's happening here in our own backyard.
This actually looks worse.
It actually does look worse.
It's a little worse.
So in Orange County, California, there is a police prosecutor scandal that's been brewing for quite some time. And it's all come to a head and been exposed in the paper nationally. Guys, they're colluding on informants. And basically, as I understand it, there were some informants who weren't willing to play ball with police and prosecutors. And the prosecutor's office used the Mexican mafia in order to take out some of these informants. They disappeared. Then there was the cover-up. They used the sheriff's office to help cover this up. And then in subsequent cases, when the defense attorneys asked for the informant information, rather than turn over what had been done and where literally the body had been buried, they just went ahead and dismissed these cases so as to not even have to disclose their crimes. And I'm going to call them crimes because they are. There's no doubt. I mean, the DA's office has been recused on this stuff. They're bringing in special prosecutors. They're bringing in a whole new law enforcement arm to investigate this. This is dirty as dirty get, isn't it, guys?
It is, and it's not surprising. It's Orange County. It's one of the most conservative counties in the country. And everyone thinks, oh, California, all liberals. But this didn't happen in San Francisco.
Right.
This didn't happen in LA. This happened in Orange County, which is a couple notches to the right of Genghis Khan. And that's not a coincidence. That's a pattern.
Yeah.
And it's sad that fairness boils down to politics, but it does.
Well, and I find this interesting, the timing of this with the escape of El Chapo.
Right.
It all comes out at the same time, but whether that's coincidental or not, that's a debate for another day. But it is interesting that these prosecutors would take the step of actually dismissing cases to cover up what they had done. And I think we were talking before the show, there's just no rewards for them to do the right thing, is there, guys? I mean, you don't get promoted for dismissing cases.
Unfortunately, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't. It should be very simple. I remember whenever I was sworn in to become a prosecutor by Susan Brown, there was a guy there who gave a fantastic speech that I still remember. His name was Mark Donnelly. He's now at the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yep.
He said, whenever you pick up a file and you read something that makes you say, uh-oh, you tell the defense.
And it was Mark doing the right thing that got him fired from the DA's office here, ironically.
Yes.
That's the sad thing. There's not just a disincentive to not do that. There's an incentive to cheat and lie. Look at Kelly Siegler, one of the most successful prosecutors in the history of Harris County, and apparently Her record was built on lies and deception. She's the Mark McGuire or Barry Bonds of the system. She has a great record. She knocked it out of the park. But now we know she did that by lying and cheating. And it not just taints her record, it taints all prosecutors. And I want to make the point now, they're not all bad. They're not even mostly bad. There's some excellent, honest, good, hard-fighting prosecutors. This gentleman here sitting to my right was one of them. But the point is, like plumbers or baseball players or criminal defense lawyers or prosecutors, there's good ones and bad ones. And the scary thing is that these bad prosecutors have power over the lives of your children. And this isn't just a problem for us lawyers, folks. How would you feel if your son got busted at school for marijuana, and then you found out that the government lawyers lied and cheated your son and put him in prison for that? Let me take this a step further because it really incenses me.
I couldn't tell.
Right. You seem
Of
very
course.
passionate right now.
Yeah.
When you do something that you tell other people not to do, there's a word for that. It's called hypocrisy. But when you do what Kelly Siegler did, she spent 21 years locking up children on minor offenses. There are probably 10 to 20,000 teenagers in prison because of Kelly Siegler's work. Then she goes out and commits crimes much more egregious than what she locked up children for. And to me, that transcends hypocrisy. In Texas, I like to call that a-holiness. And are you proud of me for cleaning that up?
That's a good way to get around our broadcasting rules for sure, Wayne. I'm liking your creativity.
And the sad thing is, they don't have to do that. These prosecutors have all the facts, they have all the law, they have all the judges, they have all the public sentiment on their side. You don't have to cheat. And when you cheat, you make all prosecutors look bad. And I'm going to take it a step further. Let's look at two examples of Kelly's work, the Susan Wright case and the Temple case, which is just broken in the news. And folks, don't take our word for this stuff. Read the record. 36 separate and distinct violations by Kelly Siegler.
Right.
And David Temple has been in prison now for longer than 10 years because of her cheating. Now think about that for a minute. The Susan Wright case is probably even a better example because it was overturned and the government was forced to retry that case at taxpayers' expense. If you had done that right, Ms. Siegler, one trial would have been enough. Instead, your lying and cheating cost Texas taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars. In my book, she ought to be prosecuted for theft as a public servant. You think about it. Her malfeasance, her intentional, premeditated lying and cheating has cost Texas taxpayers a lot of money.
And it's not just a mindset, Wayne. I mean, there's a lot of policies in that office, Jamal, that really put the mainline prosecutors in a bind and really hamstring them on what they can do, right? In terms of what you can do on cases, the kind of recs you can make in terms of being reasonable, when you can dismiss cases, who you have to talk to before you can dismiss a case.
There are antiquated policies in the DA's office, and one policy that I thought was ridiculous was that, I don't know if you're familiar with how intake works. At intake, officer calls in and tells a prosecutor, this is a probable cause I have, and it may take anywhere between 2 and 3 minutes, and you can, at the end of that conversation, an officer may walk away with an aggravated assault charge, a drug charge, prostitution, whatever. That prosecutor along the road may be the one trying the case. Now, it's a lot harder for that prosecutor to dismiss it whenever they have an actual feel for the facts and the evidence, because they would have to talk to a supervisor. Normally, it's a district court chief or either a misdemeanor chief in order to dismiss that case. If it's a murder, you have to go to the division chief.
They dismiss murders?
Occasionally they do, it happens.
For informants.
Oh, gotcha.
It happens.
Gotcha.
But if people would take time on the front end and ask more questions, you may not have to work as hard on the back end to get rid of one. And with the sentencing policies, yes, there are some old, antiquated policies. I believe they still had this old policy where you couldn't offer deferred on a first-degree felony. I believe that policy came from Johnny Holmes before I was ever around the office, but they still hold to that. Burglary of habitation prosecutors still won't offer deferred adjudication. Now, they can only make prison time offers. They recommend that you go to the judge without a degree recommendation, and hopefully the judge will do justice and give the kid a deferred. But the judge can also do what they feel is just in their own mind and give the kid 20 years in TDC.
Which is going to depend upon the election year or not. Which
It could.
I am very serious with this. I have seriously weighed the fact that it was an election year before approaching a judge on any kind of without agreed rec plea or PSI for that reason right there.
Right.
Well, I think we've all made that calculated risk, especially post-election when you have a judge that's been defeated. That's when you try and rush in and do a plea to the judge because you know they're likely to give you whatever you ask for on the way out.
This very policy comes into play in some very serious ways. And folks, don't think for a moment I've got any sympathy for burglars. But like I said earlier, there's burglaries and there's burglaries. And I want to give you an example of a case that Ted Poe tried about 1 million years ago when he was a prosecutor. Congressman Poe, formerly Judge Poe, has bragged many times, including in the Texas Bar Journal, he never lost a felony trial. Well, there's a great lawyer in town, my personal hero, John Pizzatola, who tried a case against Ted Poe that was a burglar of a habitation. It was a teenage young black kid who went into somebody's garage and took their lawnmower. Judge Poe argued for life in prison on a teenage first offender who took a lawnmower. Johnny P. is a great lawyer, talked the jury into probation for that young man, yet that's one of Judge Poe's victories because the guy was convicted.
Yeah.
There's a lot of deception going on down there, but folks, things aren't as simple as they seem. You bet burglars should go to prison, but not all
Or
burglars.
get shot.
We were talking before the show about the prosecutorial misconduct, and this Orange County case, I mean, this is probably one of the most egregious that I've seen since the Ted Stevens case, which we were talking about.
I think this is actually more because this is systematic.
Yeah.
It's not just one prosecutor
Right.
like Kelly or Dan Rizzo. We're talking about an entire office and with the complicity of the sheriff's office. So not just rogue prosecutors making these moves, but actual sheriff's office and law enforcement working in conjunction with them to create databases, to talk to the Mexican mafia, to kill witnesses.
If I could throw some numbers in there, go ahead, John.
That's long been a problem with the DA's office. I know it's a problem here, and I think it's a problem everywhere else where the DAs and the police believe that they're on the same team.
Right.
They believe that their jobs are to help each other out, when in all reality, their jobs are separate and distinct. The officers, they're supposed to investigate crimes. If they have something, they bring it to the DA's office to prosecute. And if something goes wrong, the officers are hoping the DA's office will help them out. You know, do a brother a solid, if you will, and not expose some of the wrongdoings.
And that was certainly borne out by the texting scandal this week, where we saw that a sheriff's deputy had been texting a prosecutor in the middle of trial about private deliberations. And by the way, I want to go back to the point you made. Folks, this is not the tip of any iceberg here. This is the iceberg. I want to put some numbers to that. And these numbers are more than a decade old. We talk about one case or two cases. These are anecdotal episodes. About 15 years ago, there was a magazine called The Champion that published an article on these sorts of violations. These are known as Brady violations. Brady versus Maryland was a case from the early 60s where the Supreme Court said, prosecutors, you got to give the exculpatory evidence to the defense. Exculpatory for the public means evidence that helps me and my client, not just on guilt innocence, but even on punishment. This article set out more than 5,500 published Brady violations. And remember, only 1 in 1,000 cases gets published in the appellate opinions. Of the 5,500 cited Brady violations, there had been 6 prosecutors who had been sanctioned by bar associations. More recently, South Texas Law Review published an article, and I say recently, even this was 10 years ago, where they cited 318 homicide cases that had been reversed on appeal because of prosecutorial Brady violations. This problem is not an isolated thing. This is endemic, and it runs throughout the system. And the reason why is that the judges let them get away with it.
Isn't this Orange County deal kind of, I don't know, we talk about how, we as lawyers often talk about how the fact that what you see on TV, Law and Order, Suits, any of those shows, that's not really the way law is practiced. That's not really what goes on. But you do see a lot of these shows like True Detective and some of these others where you see the cops and the prosecutors making deals with the bad guys and, you know, either looking the other way on this gang activity or this, or like classic instance in one of the True Detective episodes where the guy's going in and trying to get information on another target, and he's going and talking to prostitutes and pimps and everything else, and they won't talk. He's like, look, I'm not Vice. I don't care about that. So he's looking the other way. He's a cop, but he's looking the other way. And I think this highlights that stuff like that does go on. If it fits their agenda, and if they want to, whatever their agenda is to push, if it requires making a deal with the Mexican mafia, well, we'll do it.
Well, so I want to talk that particular issue. I'm okay with cops being selective in how they investigate.
Sure.
I mean, prostitution ought not be illegal, but it is. Fine, that's the law. But if you want to go after the big fish and let the small stuff go, that makes sense to me, right? What I'm against in Orange County, what we've seen is the systematic abuse and potential murder charges, as well as here in Harris County and probably every other DA's office in the country, is the idea that Wayne said it, we said it, you don't have to cheat. Like when you have law enforcement at your disposal, and you have, like in Houston, we have 2 different forms of IFAS, Institute of Forensic Sciences, at your disposal, and you have public sentiment, and you have you have judges 24 hours a day who can answer a phone call and issue warrants. Why in the world are you shortcutting the system?
Yeah.
Like, why? And when you shortcut the system like that, you give hopefully even a half-decent defense attorney all the ammunition they need to really blast and make you look bad. And why? If you just do your job right, if you just take the extra step on the front end, just like Jamal said, you spend not 2 to 4 minutes, but you spend the extra time on the front end to do it right, the back end will be easier.
Wayne, you mentioned it earlier in the show, you talked about the Alfred Brown case and the misconduct there in the grand jury and how prosecutor, Dan Rizzo in that case, browbeat a witness, turned their testimony, ultimately ended up in a conviction of the defendant. And this week, despite calls for an investigation of that former prosecutor, Devin Anderson issued a letter saying basically, we don't think there's a case here, and even if there was, the statute of limitations is run on it. And so unlike what's happening in Orange County, here we have, and it's also happening in the Temple case as well, where there's been a call for a special prosecutor to come in. She's just kind of taken the silent route on that one. But with regards to Rizzo, she's saying there's nothing here.
Of course, there's a lot of authority that says the statute of limitations has not run because the statute is told or put on hold, so to speak, until the prosecutorial misconduct is discovered. It's a classic example of circling the wagons to protect their own. Mm-hmm. And the saddest and scariest
But what's the incentive of that, Wayne? I mean, these are prosecutors who are no longer with this office.
Classic cover-up. Classic cover-up. They don't want to make themselves look bad. And to me, the sad and scary irony, though, is that Dan was one of the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. Never in a million years would you think that he would do something like this. With Kelly, nobody was surprised because that's her. Dan's a really nice guy. Maybe that has something to do with Devin's decision, but I think it's just more classic, circling the wagons, protect your own.
But isn't this an opportunity? And we talk about how running tough on crime and doing that with all the stuff in the news about prosecutorial misconduct, with all the stuff that's happened, isn't this an opportunity for a sitting DA to say, I'm going to clean up my office, and I'm telling you, the voters out there, that I'm not going to put up with this stuff. And that could be a platform in and of itself, that I'm not going to allow this to go on in my office, and you can trust the integrity of this office.
Transparency goes a long way because that's all the public really asks for. If there's nothing there, an investigation will show that there's nothing there.
Right.
If you have people that may be tied to it, step out of it, let someone else do it. It's simple.
There's another reason to go after these prosecutors that commit these bad acts, and that's deterrence. Prosecutors talk a big game about, we got to put burglars in prison so other people know not to commit burglaries. Well, let me tell you something.
Yeah, but we know
our
that
clients don't think
know that
about
works.
that.
Yeah.
It doesn't work because our clients aren't thinkers. These aren't premeditated crimes usually. They're crimes of opportunity.
Yeah.
But in a case like Kelly, she sat down for many years and devised a plan to be deceptive. And she was the golden girl. Most prosecutors in the state looked up to her. She was the model of success. There's a spotlight on this case, and if you want to make an example, District Attorney Anderson, you could teach every prosecutor in this state that there are results for your misbehavior. A lot of conservatives talk about personal responsibility. was here's your chance to hold Kelly Siegler personally responsible for lying and cheating and ruining a man's life. And if you did that, every other prosecutor might think twice before they commit the same Brady violations.
We got a phone call coming in. I want to get to our phone lines. Hello, thank you for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Interesting show.
Thank you.
I was behind the times. What brought down Kelly Siegler? I don't get the paper daily, so I don't know how that happened. Also, the president's visiting a prison. Do you think he's going to make a move on making marijuana like a civil right or whatever? Thank you.
Sure.
Wade, you're pretty versed on Kelly Siegler. Tell us, if you can briefly,
Yeah.
what brought Kelly Siegler down?
I don't think
Or-
I don't think I can
hasn't
do
been brought
anything
down.
briefly.
No,
But
sure.
Just give us the
She hasn't been brought
35,000
down,
foot
but,
view.
yeah.
Kelly Siegler brought herself down. It was her own arrogance and her own hubris to think she could get away with being a liar and a cheat. And it worked for a long while. She got her own TV show.
Yeah.
You know, attorney Paul Looney, who was the first lawyer to represent David Temple, his theory is Kelly did this whole thing to get a TV show. She was turned down the first time, and once this case broke and she's super prosecutor, all of a sudden she's got her own show.
Well, there's some backstory there about this. This was going on the same time as the Scott Peterson case was going on, and that really drove this. All the attention that was going to that case. This was very similar, and so I think there was a backstory there in terms, you know, that pushed this and pushed her to the misconduct of hiding all this evidence and not disclosing it to the defense. And that, for the caller, that's what got her in trouble. She failed to disclose about 36 different instances of exculpatory evidence to the defense in a murder trial.
Actually, Jimmy, I want to add,
Yeah.
in my opinion, Kelly's not in trouble. She's not really in trouble yet. She still has her license, right? She's still on the TV show, whatever, Code Justice, whatever it is. And so
Right.
she's still making money off that. To a lot of prosecutors, she still is a hero prosecutor, really only to the defense bar and like our wives and husbands and family and friends is she's now being exposed for what she is. Once the state bar, like Charles Sebesta, makes a move against her, which I hope they do, and she gets publicly exposed via the taking of her license or sanctioned in some way, will she actually be in trouble for, in my opinion, for what she's done? Because right now, if I was Kelly, I wouldn't be worried about anything right now.
Well, and I was going to say that probably the only deterrence is a taking of the bar card. But you know, the counter to that is, look, what do you see most often in the bar journal for people losing their license is stealing client funds. And it goes on all the time. There's the people who lost their license and they've still, you pick up that journal, you read it, and there's 10 of them every day. So it's like that hasn't deterred people from stealing their
Jimmy, I
clients'
think
funds.
there'd be a lot more deterrence if Ms. Siegler was prosecuted for obstruction of justice.
I agree.
She ought to do the same exact amount of time that David Temple's done based on her lies and cheating.
Yeah, so I don't think that the bar card, I hear a lot of people say, well, take her bar card. I don't think that's enough. I think you actually have to go the step of prosecuting people criminally for violations like this, whether it's obstruction of justice, whether it's for perjury, which we know that there were some instances in those findings of fact and conclusions of law that could amount to perjury. So I think that would be the deterrence.
And there's no civil remedy because prosecutors have immunity. You can't be sued for Brady violations.
Exactly.
We can change that. I mean, that's only a flick of the pen and a vote in the government. I don't know. Maybe because I'm biased by being a defense attorney that I'm not really for a lot of prosecutions, so it's hard for me to get behind that one. I'm definitely for losing your bar card, and I think she should be publicly shamed. And along the bar card situation, when I was in law school, I had an ethics professor tell us he said you can have sex with a client, you can kill a client, whatever you do, don't steal from one. And it's exactly what he told us. It's the only thing you get in trouble for. And I thought, I laughed at it, kind of funny, started practicing it, and it's so true. And that's really unfortunate. So I hope I hope justice is served and the outcome is proper for whatever happens to her. If that outcome results in her getting her license suspended, I don't think I will lose much sleep behind it. Same thing with Dan Rizzo and any other prosecutor who I think does something as egregious. I mean, I'm not an advocate for the top level punishment for everybody, but when you have somebody's life in your hands and you use your authority in a way inconsistent with justice, right, then you should face some sort of punishment, some sort of punitive action.
And by the way, if any of the public wants the details on what Kelly did, it's a published opinion. It was on the Houston Chronicle's website. 36 different points cited of just how she cheated and lied with great detail. It's good reading.
We only got a few minutes left, and the last thing I want to cover for tonight is this letter by District Judge Mike McSpadden. He wrote a letter to Senator John Whitmire, and it was a pretty terse letter about the jail overcrowding, and it went right to the heart of it, and basically said that the district attorney's office could exercise discretion on some of these low-level crimes. That would reduce the jail overcrowding issue. And I want to get you guys' thoughts on that, because it seems like there's now a little bit of a fracture between the judiciary-DA relationship, at least on that point. What are your thoughts? Jamal?
My belief is that if you don't hold up all this bed space, the sheriff budget, his budget goes down. Sheriff needs his budget. They care about it. They fight over it every year, Commissioner's Court, because I believe every year the sheriff asks for, I want to say, about 10% increase, and it's only because people are getting arrested for these small amounts of drugs. I think currently the sheriff has now started sending people out of county again that are being held for these low-level crimes.
And that's the big controversy here, I think, that this letter speaks to, is that the publicity from Lisa Falkenberg's article and from Senator Whitmire has been about, why are we shipping these people out? Why can't we come up with a better solution on bonds, PR bonds, personal recognizance bonds, and just letting people out? To which Judge McSpadden's reply was, you know nothing about the history of pretrial release and people on bond in Harris County.
The argument, the law enforcement argument, is that if you go ahead and you prosecute all these people for these crack pipes, then they probably won't be out breaking into people's houses or committing these other thefts or breaking into people's cars, because they believe that's what people do to get these small levels, to go out and buy their next rock. Now, I believe based on recent statistics, they really don't hold true, because whenever Pat Likas had her policy of not prosecuting these trace cases, I don't remember seeing an uptick in burglaries or an uptick in B&Bs or theft cases.
All you have to do is read history. We've tried the lock 'em up approach for many years.
Yeah, we
It's
only
not
got a
working,
few
folks.
We only got a few seconds left. I mean, it's an interesting issue, and certainly one that I think we'll be able to come back to. But I wanted to get this out here because I do think it's an important issue in the start of what's to be a greater debate as the year goes on. But I want to thank you guys for coming on. Wayne Heller, Jamal Haynes, it was really great to have you guys on tonight. And
Thanks for having me on. This is a great way to vent my spleen. It's cheaper than therapy.
I just want to say, I think Jamal had it right. Money and politics is driving all this. So if we can change the money factor and the politics factor, we can actually see some justice.
Yeah, and we got a lot of work to do in that arena. But I want to thank all you guys for coming on tonight and sharing your opinions and your comments on all these issues. And for those of y'all who tuned in tonight, not on Twitter, and for our call-in sitting, we thank you for watching. And we'll see you next week on Reasonable Doubt. Same time next week, next Thursday, 8 p.m. Follow us on Facebook and hit us up on Twitter. See ya.
Thank you.
Same bat time, same bat channel.